Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. Today, we're exploring the pride of your toaster.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Seth Nelson. As always, I'm here with my good friend, Pete Wright. Divorce is divorce is divorce, right? Not so fast. With marriage equality becoming the law of the land on June 26, 2015, so did divorce equality. And while the legal machine of divorce process will be quite familiar, can we say the same about the cultural adaptation to gay divorce? Stephen Petrow is an award-winning journalist and best-selling book author who is best known for his Washington Post and New York Times essays on LGBTQ life, health, and civility. He also has an opinion column for USA Today, where he writes about civil discourse and manners, and in his piece in The Atlantic, Celebrating My Gay Divorce, he writes with vulnerability and candor about his own experience with divorce equality. Stephen, welcome to the Toaster.
I'm glad to be in the hot seat. So I'm a little afraid of you guys, gentlemen, but we're good. And I just want to be clear, I'm a gay divorcee, but that divorcee has only one E in it and the accent mark.
Of course, a writer is immediately going to say that.
Of course it does. And I appreciate that you come with such syntax.
Of course.
Immediately out of the gate. You are writing about civil discourse and manners. Boy, did you land on the wrong show.
Now you can tell me.
Or else the right show. Yeah, you didn't know. We called you into as an intervention for us. We've been noodling about a show about gay divorce for years, but Seth always comes back to me and he says, gay divorce is gay divorce, man. Like, I'm a lawyer. The law has has rules for divorce, and we follow those rules, whether you're gay divorce or straight divorce. It doesn't matter. Why would we need a show on gay divorce? The more and more we start reading about this, the more we run into maybe not legal issues with gay divorce, though there are some to talk about, but cultural issues around gay divorce that might make for an interesting conversation on this show. And here you are, as somebody experienced with it, writing about it, thinking critically about it. What do we need to know about gay divorce?
Well, I always hate to get in between a couple. So I'm thinking about you and Seth as a couple here. A couple of what? I'm not sure.
Good. Off to the right track. So,
from a legal perspective, yes, the divorce is a divorce is a divorce. And, I think you're absolutely right, though. When it comes to cultural aspects and personal aspects, it's very different for LGBTQ people in several ways. And, one of them, I remember when I was partnered, and then I was married for a total of 14 years. And then in 2016, we separated, had a legal separation, and then were declared divorced in 2017. So many of my friends in the queer community didn't even know that the laws are applied the same equally to same-sex couples as opposite-sex couples. And then you kind of go out of the queer community and frankly, there are many heterosexual people who did not have that understanding. I think, people just didn't really think about it because, of course, if you were to drill down, we generally don't have laws that apply only to one group or another. And so certainly, these laws are the same. But, 2017 came fairly quickly after 2015 when marriage equality was made the law of the land by the Supreme Court. And so, so there were some real lessons. There were lessons for me in this. There were lessons for my friends, our families, and communities.
So how do you feel like you changed as a result of your divorce?
Well, can we back up before we get there, Pete?
Sure.
Let's back up to how did it change when you had the right to get married and you got married? Because were you in a long-term committed relationship?
Yeah, we had been together for 8 or 9 years at that point. And we married in the summer of 2013. And, we had a good relationship at that point, in getting married. So we're both in our 50s. And before tying the knot, we did not do a prenup. But we did speak to our accountant, how is this going to make sense financially? We looked at our legal paperwork and sort of brought that up to speed. And I will tell you that I was surprised by what happened after we got married, because we're an established couple for a long time. But when we had this reception at our home in North Carolina, Hillsborough, North Carolina, this was the first same-sex wedding reception that anyone there had ever been to. And for us, or I'll speak for me, it was very affirming of the relationship in a way I had never expected. It just kind of took it to a different level. We were married, we were husbands, even though there was stumbling over what to call each of us. Are they still boyfriends or partners? No, we're husbands or spouses. There was a real public aspect to that. I come from a family where my mother and father were in the New York Times when they got married. It's kind of been, part of our lives that way. We were in the New York Times when we got married. So there was kind of hooking into traditions also around matrimony that some consider heteronormative. I kind of like them.
Right. I find that very interesting because my fiance and I have been together for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete knows this. We split up for a couple of years, and my understanding of why that is because I wanted to get married and she did not. If she was here, she would be telling a different story, and I assure you hers would be correct and mine would be wrong. It would
be the right story.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. She would always say, but I'm in a committed relationship with you. I want to be with you the rest of my life. And I'm like, it's just different to me. I can't explain it. It's part of my DNA. And so I wonder, now we got engaged and people treat us differently. They're all excited about the wedding. It is a different level. And she's mildly annoyed. Like, well, why didn't people treat us like this before? And I said, because it's just different. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. And it seems to me that when you've lived that and gotten married, you've had that exact experience. Like, it is a different level.
There's all the joy of being a soon-to-be married couple, and you're sort of a showpiece now for the gay community, in particularly in a community where there isn't a lot of gay marriage.
Yeah, absolutely true. And it felt like we were role models, and there was there was a responsibility in that too. And I guess part of since I write about LGBTQ issues, I've been writing about same-sex marriage for many years. I felt I felt especially close to the issue. And then, of course, when our marriage dissolved, it was challenging to me on another level that way, because I am in the public eye about that. And I remember talking to a friend / colleague who is actually a lesbian wedding planner, and then she got divorced, and she felt, people not going to come to me anymore because I'm divorced. And that was not the case. And this is some of the, I guess, internal dialogue that we had to deal with. But it was real. It was real in my head. In any case, I often hear voices, though. So what can I say?
Well, this is the thing we've heard before, that the additional, that same showpiece sort of structure of being a marrying gay couple, you become the same showpiece as you describe of being a divorcing gay couple. And part of the stigma on that is failing at being gay. Like, you've wanted this the whole time, and now you can't even keep it. Right? That's what I've had reflected on from some of my gay couple friends. How does that hit you? I mean, is that not only that, you're also in the public eye?
Same-sex couples and queer people have wanted to get married, or most of us have wanted to get married, for our whole lives, and we were not able to do that. Then we are able to do that. Then I do that, and then it doesn't work out. There's sort of, many levels of failure within that. There's the sense of personal failure within the relationship, and then kind of the larger, more diffuse one. How does the world see us, and what does it mean? Well, in the end, it means that same-sex couples are very much like opposite-sex couples. Some marriages work. Some marriages don't. We're human beings, together and separately. But all of that was new. And, there aren't that many divorced same-sex couples.
Turns out the lesson we had to prove all along is exactly that relationships fail, and that is equality. We collectively know how to screw up relationships. And go to Seth.
Yeah, and one thing that surprised me also was around languaging. That you said that after you got engaged, people sort of honored your relationship in a different way. After Jim and I separated and then divorced, people were really not sure of the language to use. And they were like, oh, you guys broke up. You're not shacking up together anymore. It really felt like...
Because that's a romantic term.
That's a romantic term. But a lot of the language diminished the legal relationship that we had. It was kind of like a plaything, and we're going to use words that really don't honor it. And so that was actually part of the education that I found myself doing as a writer around that, and in that Atlantic piece, that it has the same emotional significance, it has the same legal significance, and alas, sometimes the same economic circumstances. I mean, we got into an alimony, air quotes, discussion, that was very painful and is frequently in the center of other people's divorces. So
that is so true. Just on that point, if I may, is that language matters. And I mean, we got a brilliant writer on the show. I don't have to tell him that. Currently now in Florida, in Hillsborough County, there's been a change in the law where before we would say it's a divorce. I represent the husband, I represent the wife. And throughout all of our documents, it would be husband, wife, husband, wife, husband, wife. The technical legal term is whoever files for divorce is the petitioner, and whoever is responding is the respondent. So now it is changed where all of our forms are petitioner respondent, and we no longer say husband, wife. Quite frankly, in our own practice area, because in family law, it doesn't really matter that much. There's some strategy reasons whether you want to file first or second. It doesn't make that big of a difference. So I will frequently forget whether I'm petitioner or respondent, who I'm representing, right? When we're in court, I remember, but these changes in words matter. And I think there's a lot of what I'll call the 50s stereotype. The wife stays home with the children and raises the kid, and the husband goes out and works, and then we have this alimony component. And obviously, if they're getting divorced, mom should be taking care of the children because that's what mothers do. Well, when you have two fathers in the courtroom, that stereotype is out the window. So I think there's been some dynamic relationship changes coming before the court where they might have had unconscious bias before that is no longer there because they're different parties standing in front of them.
I think that's a really good point. And I remember, what is it, 2022, not that long ago, maybe 2014 or so, many marriage certificates had bride and groom. And then now you have two brides or you have two grooms. Some people don't even like either of those words, but it was very from a different period and set off different associations and connotations.
Seth, Nelson, it is, believe it or not, it's still back to school season, but we're going to call it back at school season because for now, I think just about everybody, we're easing back into the school year. Kids are in school and we're practicing now some new behaviors, I imagine. Am I right?
Absolutely. So kids are back at school. Hopefully we're back to a routine. Summer is always all over the place. So we're back at school, but things can be stressful, especially now. It matters whether the kids have all their stuff when they go to the other parent's house, because that stuff might be their homework. That stuff might be their books, their pencils. Do they have their athletic gear that they need for extracurriculars after school, or their instrument that they're playing, or anything else that they may be doing? It can be stressful. When people get stressed, they tend to self-medicate. Please don't do that with alcohol.
Please don't do that with alcohol. And that's why we at How to Split a Toaster, our entire mission is to help save relationships and get you through your divorce process. We have partnered with Soberlink. Soberlink offers resources to help you navigate these complex waters of this back to school, back at school season. What is Soberlink?
Soberlink is a remote alcohol monitoring technology. It's created to help you prove your sobriety in custody cases. The system includes a high-tech breathalyzer device with facial recognition that allows you to receive real-time updates from monitoring co-parents anytime, anywhere, allowing for swift intervention to improve child safety. Now, if you're the one being monitored, let's get something straight here. This is to help make sure your kids are safe. And put your ego to the side and say, look, even if I don't need to be monitored, I'm not an alcoholic, and you're having those conversations. Another approach is, yeah, happy to do it, because I'm going to show to you and the court that the kids are safe with me. And I'm just going to ask that when I do the facial recognition, because it's not the best picture, it's just not going to be used for any other reasons other than the court proceedings. And you're willing to do that to keep your kids safe so you can spend quality time with them. That's what Soberlink is all about.
And Soberlink is currently offering a free back-to-school and divorce packet that includes a Q&A with a top divorce attorney, back-to-school checklist, communication tips, and more. And you can get yours by visiting www.soberlink.com/toaster. Thanks to Soberlink for sponsoring How to Split a Toaster. In the spirit of, check your local jurisdiction, I'm curious how equality as the law of the land applies across the laws of the land. And I will say it is ironic to me that you're talking about what seems to be a progressive change in the way your court filing is handled, right? Petitioner and respondent, coming from a state where you can't actually say the word, right? Whereas making the news for don't say gay. Like,
welcome to my world, Pete.
So,
right?
I feel like we have to have that conversation at some level buried in the subtext of what we're saying here, because, in just reading up on some of the issues, where does the law get complicated in and around gay divorce? If it's just the law is the law is the law, why then are there still issues around child custody and child support and alimony? How is that handled?
So, Pete, before we get all the way into that, I want to kindly make another language suggestion.
Please.
Before same-sex couples could be married, there was this phrase, gay marriage. And we didn't like that because gay is used as a modifier or as an adjective, marriage.
Yeah.
It's marriage, and then it's marriage of same-sex couples. So, when we're talking about divorce, it's really not gay divorce unless you're being clever. It's, divorce of same-sex couples, because it's not a different kind of divorce at all. And, we all want the same, the same rights and responsibilities in divorce. So just wanted to say that.
Well, I think that's a great point. And to Stephen's point is, I think in court, and I've seen it, right? The law doesn't change, but how it gets applied at some levels might be more even-handed because you don't have the unconscious bias that I was referring to before. And it's the way I present my case is always different based upon the judge that I have, that I know some arguments I know don't work because I've made them before. They didn't work. We always prepare it within the law and with the facts, and every case is different. But I work really hard to present cases to bring the court information that I think they need to make the decision. When we had Judge Tibbles on, we talked about that, Pete. But how you present that information can be vastly different between attorneys and between ultimately outcomes in that courtroom. And when you're doing that with the same-sex couple, understanding that there aren't necessarily these unconscious bias, but if there's a sliver that opens the door for the judge and the court to be like, oh, I get it, and this is derogatory, but this is them thinking it without saying it, that's the husband, that's the wife. And they fall right back into it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just landing on those stereotypes.
That's just right. Like my mother. Just like my mother. She could not understand how in a marriage there could be, there had to be a husband and a wife. So who who was the husband and who was the wife in my relationship. My mother kept saying she was, in her 80s at that point, but that, comes from, a different paradigm. It also seems to me like there is the elephant in this room. We're talking about the Supreme Court, case Obergefell versus Hodges from 2015. Many people in my community are extremely worried about what this court might do to marriage equality and what that would mean for couples who are currently married and for couples who might want to get married. And, it's frightening. It's frightening, and many of the the rationales used in the recent abortion case could be applied here. Seth, you probably know more about all that legal stuff than I do, but it's a concern.
To extend the concern, when you think about all the rights that have come through 2015's change, could those rights for divorce be somehow eroded, and suddenly you have less of a right to have an even sort of equity in the divorce process? Is that as rational a fear for current same-sex married couples?
Absolutely. And first off, I agree. According to the rationale of the abortion case that overturned 50 years of precedent and took away a right, that rationale all flows through same-sex marriage, privacy to contraception. Interestingly enough, Justice Thomas stopped short of this, in his opinion, when he says, this could apply to all these things we're talking about, but he didn't mention interracial couples, and he's in an interracial marriage, right? So the same rationale flows through. To your point, Pete, and to Stephen's point, if right now you have a couple, same sex, that is married, and they don't want to be in that relationship, and there's no prenup, there's a way to get out. You get divorced. Or just take the prenup out for a second. You're married, you get divorced.
We know how divorce works.
What happens if the Supreme Court says you're no longer married? How do you divide up your stuff if you choose that you no longer want to live together? How do you do time sharing in custody, in visitation, if you choose no longer to live under the same roof? How do you decide on death issues, on who can be in the ICU with you when it's only your spouse and you're no longer married? There are all these other issues that arise that deal with the most emotional, heartfelt, difficult parts of our lives that people in the gay community had to deal with for a long time. And then they got marriage equality, and a lot of problems were solved, and they will be even worse, I think, than what not having it, you're in the relationship, and now poof, it's gone.
Right. And, so many people were shocked about the abortion decision. We had 50 years of precedent and precedence here. It was almost unbelievable. And so this kind of falls in my head in the unbelievable category too, that this might happen. But we've already just seen it happen with this court, and so unfortunately anything seems possible. And, the ruinous nature of that, the inherently unequal nature of that is abhorrent and then deeply frightening to so many people, to couples with kids, so on and so forth.
There are so many clickbaity headlines. I was just sort of traipsing around the internet as I want to do, looking at what are the challenges in divorce, and they're, the leading headlines are like, child custody could just go completely wrong, and you think the court is going to completely misunderstand child custody, and it's going to be just terrible. And there's story after story of same-sex couples actually trying to use the fact that they were same sex to get out of paying alimony and the courts or child support, and the court saying, no, you were married, you're a parent, you can't get out of it just because you're not biologically related to this child. It seems to be a small percentage of overall stories, but they're out there, and they feel like, yes, okay, we have arrived at marriage equality. Everybody's trying to game the divorce process.
With rights come responsibilities. That is specifically true to marriage.
Yep.
That's all I have to say to that. If you are a parent and you're in a same-sex couple and you're getting divorced, you're on the line. That's part of your responsibility.
To use your words, same institution, same benefits, same penalties.
Thank you for reminding me of my words, Pete.
You're very welcome. I have them right here, and I'm just have a call to the tattoo parlor. I'm just going to work that out.
I do not know. I do not want to know where you're putting that tattoo.
It's kind of a long sentence. Seth, I want to pivot here real quick. Do you have anything else on this before we get into some really important business?
Pete, if you're going to pivot, I'm never getting in your way. I've learned my lesson.
Stephen, when was your divorce? What year?
Divorced in 2018. Separated in 2017. I might have gotten the years wrong earlier.
I'm going to read just a short passage to you, and I would like you to reflect on whether or not there is any connection between your divorce and proximity to this project. Stupid things I won't do when I get old, a highly judgmental, unapologetically honest accounting of all the things our elders are doing wrong. This is your new book right after you get divorced. Stephen, what happened?
That is a very sharp pivot, but thank you for pivoting. There's an overlap in time in that I started working on this book in 2017 when I was well into my 50s and my parents were well into their 70s, and it was very focused on their aging issues and challenges. And actually, Pete, in terms of the calendar, my mom died in January of 2017. My dad died in April the same year. And then Jim and I separated right in between. He chose February to leave. So they were kind of all muddled together, and a pretty awful year for me. But yeah, so that book really came out of trying to be a better son to my parents, trying to learn some of the lessons from their generation so that we can live a little bit happier and smarter. But the book I'm working on now, it doesn't have a fancy or a snarky title yet, but it's about finding joy in challenging times. And so there I will be reflecting more on what happened in my marriage and what happened after, because I am much more joyful now that I'm out of that marriage.
That sounds like a relief, a silver lining. Yeah.
In the moment when you were going through the divorce, did you think ever that I will be more joyful out of this, or I just want to get through this process so I can start living my best life again?
Never, ever. It was really hard. This stuff, we each had lawyers. It became somewhat litigious. It was painful. It was emotionally painful. I think when you're in a storm like that, it's really hard to see your way out. And when you don't know that many people who have been in that specific storm, and here I'm talking about sort of same-sex divorce, it was a lonely experience. And remember, I had one really good friend who had been married to a man and was divorced, and he was really a lifeline for me, just emotionally, but also sort of understanding how this all worked legally. And of course, things vary state to state. North Carolina, where I live, has this 1-year separation rule, and that is a very pro-family policy because they hope couples will come back together. That's why they make you stick it out for a year. That's not true in all states. I don't know what the case is in Florida.
It's not Florida. I think that 1-year rule, which is also the same in Louisiana and some other states that I'm aware, it just makes the pain go on for another year.
It does.
I think that is one of the travesties of those quote unquote pro-family, because that's how it's sold and that's how it's billed and that's how the politicians will talk about it.
Right.
What they miss is that hurts families that are going through the process. In unbelievable ways that take years to heal, and that scar may never go away. And it's all because, we want to keep you together.
Yeah, the state seems to know better an awful lot these days. I say that deeply sarcastically. So I guess my point is, when you're in the middle of a shitstorm, it's really hard to see your way out. So I know I did not imagine that things could be better. But we need to give some time to all of this and find a new perspective. And, I am happier. And from everything that I hear, my ex is also happier.
Well, that was actually my next question, Stephen. I mean, have you salvaged any sort of a relationship between you as friends and colleagues, or is that in the past?
I don't want to get too personal, but
of course,
he did not want to have an ongoing relationship. And then he repartnered within a couple of months and then remarried, and we sort of have been off on our separate ways. Honestly, our most contentious issue was about the dog that we had at the time, a Jack Russell Terrier. And I wound up with custody of her, Seth, thanks to a very good lawyer and some shaming on my part of
Well, I will.
You do what it takes for the dog. That's all I'm saying.
Let me tell you, Stephen. I went to trial. The main issue was who gets the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And in that trial, thankfully, we prevailed for our client. I thought it was actually the right outcome as well. I don't always say that, but those can be very emotional issues. And under the law in Florida, we always say check your local jurisdiction. It's property.
Right.
But in Florida, there's case law that also says when you deal with division of property, the court's allowed to take into your sentimental attachment to that property. And we think that ultimately, in the caring of the dog and the number of years, during separation for the year, like who has the dog, right? Like, and stuff of that nature. But it gets very fact specific, and we can joke, but dogs are part of the family.
Yeah. And I would say also within same-sex couples, dogs' pets are often, the surrogate for children. So the attachment and the meaning can be sort of disproportionately high. And if I'm remembering correctly, Seth, I think there are some jurisdictions or states, California being one of them, where they're starting to view dogs and pets not as property, but asking the question, like, what is in the best interest of the animal or of the dog? I think there's a sort of a slow shift in that direction, which I think is great.
Stephen, we had a whole podcast about what is in the best interest of the dog.
One of our top downloaded shows in our history is people wanting to learn and have learned from a specialist on what is best for the dog, talking about what's best for the pet. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating area. So stupid things I won't do when I get old. We're pitching that. We want people to make sure you go check out this book. Stephen's writing is fantastic and incisive. And as a fan myself, I eagerly endorse going and reading this book. And you're working on the Joy book. When do we get to see that?
With any luck, you'll be seeing it, and we can talk about it again in the summer of 2024.
Outstanding.
Well, Stephen, let me tell you, I have an 18-year-old son, and his favorite magazine is The Atlantic. And I am just hopeful that when I talk to him this evening and tell him that you were on the podcast, I might just get a little notch up. Like maybe I know something.
Good luck with that.
But also I know your son, and probably not.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Pete, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You know what? It was perfect. It was a double barrel. That was exactly as it should have been. Stephen Petrow, thank you so much for being here. StephenPetrow.com. Just Google search the guy. You'll find all kinds of stuff he's up to. We sure appreciate you, Stephen. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. Don't forget, you can ask a question anytime you want. Just head over to howtosplitatoaster.com, push the Ask a Question button, and then ask a question. Yeah, bing, bang, boom. You've asked a question to us. It's going to be great. We'll talk about it on the show. We'd love to hear your voice. And until then, on behalf of the fantastic Stephen Petrow and Seth Nelson, America's favorite divorce attorney, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week right here on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships.
Seth Nelson is an attorney with NLG Divorce and Family Law with offices in Tampa, Florida. While we may be discussing family law topics, How to Split a Toaster is not intended to, nor is it providing legal advice. Every situation is different. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, please seek your own legal counsel with an attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. Pete Wright is not an attorney or employee of NLG Divorce and Family Law. Seth Nelson is licensed to practice law in Florida.